The piercing shriek of a high-decibel panic alarm shattered the midday calm of the city's most affluent district, signaling the start of the most audacious heist in modern history. Within seconds, the grand glass doors of the legendary Aurelia Diamond Emporium burst open as dozens of terrified, screaming customers stumbled onto the pavement, fleeing for their lives. Inside, a heavily armed, meticulously organized syndicate had just executed a flawless multi-million-dollar raid in a matter of minutes, moving with the cold, lethal precision of a military unit. They bypassed advanced biometric locks, smashed reinforced display cases, and swept up bags of priceless diamonds and high-end jewelry before anyone could comprehend what was happening. By the time the first police cruisers arrived at the scene with sirens blaring, the thieves were already speeding away in pre-positioned their high-performance sports cars that vanished into the urban labyrinth. Security camera footage from inside the vault revealed a chilling reality. Every single movement, every second of their operation was calculated to absolute perfection. The chief of police, staring at the live tracking monitors, immediately declared a city-wide lockdown and initiated a massive full-scale manhunt, but the ghost-like crew was already miles ahead of the law. This was not a chaotic smash and grab. This was the ultimate criminal masterpiece, an impossible heist executed in broad daylight that would push the city's finest detectives to the absolute brink of sanity. As the investigation commenced, forensics teams flooded the pristine marble floors of the Emporium, searching desperately for any microscopic shred of evidence, but they found absolutely nothing. The primary investigation revealed that the entire heist took less than 4 minutes from the moment the armed group breached the perimeter to the exact second they synchronized their escape vehicles. They did not just stumble into the vault. They possessed highly classified pinpoint knowledge of the exact locations of the master safes containing the rarest, most expensive diamonds in the entire world. Every single layer of the establishment's multi-million-dollar security infrastructure, including the silent panic buttons, the backup thermal cameras, and the seismic motion sensors, had been systematically neutralized. Not a single partial fingerprint, not a stray strand of hair, nor a single drop of DNA was left behind at the crime scene, leaving the veteran forensics team completely empty-handed. The sheer level of inside knowledge required to bypass these specific military-grade systems led investigators to suspect an insider threat, a betrayal from the very top of the corporate ladder. The theory of an insider conspirator sent shockwaves through the elite circles of the diamond industry, forcing detectives to audit every employee, executive, and security contractor who had ever set foot inside the building. As the tension within the department reached a boiling point, a breakthrough arrived when an eagle-eyed witness on the outskirts of the city reported a convoy of high-speed vehicles matching the descriptions. Within moments, dozens of patrol cars, unmarked tactical units, and police motorcycles were redirected toward the northern highway, their engines roaring in a desperate bid to intercept. The ensuing pursuit quickly escalated into a heart-stopping, high-stakes chase across multiple congested transit corridors, sending civilian vehicles spinning out of control as the suspects drove with suicidal aggression. The thieves, clearly anticipating the police response, utilized highly sophisticated counter-surveillance tactics, splitting up at pre-planned intersections and driving into underground parking structures to switch vehicles. In a series of coordinated strikes, tactical units managed to box in and apprehend 2 of the getaway vehicles, arresting 3 heavily armed suspects after a brief violent standoff on a crowded overpass. However, the victory was short-lived. A thorough search of the captured vehicles and the suspects themselves revealed absolutely no trace of the stolen diamond haul. The high-value assets had completely vanished, likely transferred to a secondary transport team during one of the precision vehicle switches in the blind spots of the city's traffic cameras. The arrested suspects remained stone-faced and completely silent during intense interrogation, refusing to utter a single word or betray the identities of their accomplices. It became glaringly obvious that the police were not dealing with ordinary street criminals, but a highly disciplined network where every member was entirely expendable. Just as the lead investigators began to feel the crushing weight of a dead-end investigation, the wealthy owner of the Emporium requested a private, highly confidential meeting. Behind closed doors, the visibly shaken billionaire owner disclosed a piece of highly classified information that had been intentionally withheld from the public and the media. Among the standard inventory of commercial luxury jewelry stolen during the chaotic raid was an asset of immeasurable historical significance and unimaginable financial value. This was not just an ordinary gemstone, but a legendary, uniquely cut black diamond known in elite historical circles as the Eye of Midnight. The true financial and geopolitical value of this single stone completely eclipsed the combined worth of every other piece of jewelry taken from the vaults. For decades, the very existence and true provenance of this mysterious diamond had been guarded with life-or-death secrecy, known only to a select few global elites. The diamond possessed a dark, turbulent history, having passed through the hands of royalty warlords and shadow organizations, leaving a trail of unexplained disappearances in its wake. With this stunning revelation, the lead investigators suddenly realized that the entire commercial jewelry heist was merely an elaborate smokescreen to mask the true objective. The thieves did not care about the millions of dollars in standard retail diamonds. They had orchestrated this entire impossible operation solely to capture the Eye of Midnight. The focus of the entire investigation shifted from a standard high-profile robbery to a deep, dark plunge into the world of elite international espionage and black market antiquities. Every piece of data collected from the crime scene was reanalyzed through this new lens, looking for patterns that aligned with elite global syndicates. The precision of the heist, the neutralization of the security grid, and the flawless escape plan now made perfect sense, given the astronomical value of the true target. Armed with the knowledge of the diamond's true identity, digital forensics experts began reverse engineering the sophisticated malware used to disable the emporium's main mainframe. After hours of combing through lines of complex encrypted code, they discovered a digital signature, a hidden watermark unique to a single brilliant mind. This crucial breakthrough led investigators directly to a primary suspect, a legendary former cybersecurity architect named Marcus Vance, who had vanished from society years prior. Vance was not an ordinary criminal. He was the genius engineer who had actually designed the core prototype of the very security system used by the Emporium. He knew every single digital blind spot, every physical vulnerability, and every potential override sequence because he had built them himself from the ground up. Recognizing the extreme danger posed by this mastermind, an elite tactical squad was assembled and deployed to raid a suspected safe house located in a desolate industrial sector. They breached the heavy iron doors of the abandoned warehouse with explosive charges, moving in with weapons drawn and thermal imaging goggles scanning the shadows. However, the structure was completely abandoned, the cold air filled only with the faint lingering scent of burnt electronics and industrial cleaning chemicals. On a solitary wooden table in the center of the empty room lay a single haunting artifact, an old faded photograph of the Emporium's founder from 30 years ago. Next to the photograph were etched a series of highly complex cryptographic symbols and geographical coordinates that seemed to defy immediate logical explanation. The cryptic symbols left behind by Marcus Vance were not a mistake. They were a deliberate, calculated challenge thrown directly into the faces of the investigating authorities. The geographical coordinates led a specialized task force to a series of seemingly unrelated locations scattered across the state, from abandoned subway tunnels to historical archives. At each location, detectives discovered hidden microdrives containing heavily encrypted files, with each unlock requiring the resolution of the previous site's puzzle. As the cyber division painstakingly decrypted these fragments, they began to uncover a massive clandestine criminal network that had been operating in the shadows for generations. This network, known in whispers as the Syndicate of the Eclipse, was deeply embedded within the city's political, financial, and law enforcement infrastructures. The files revealed that the Eye of Midnight was not just a valuable gemstone, but a literal key containing micro-engraved data codes capable of unlocking a hidden global fortune. The deeper the investigators dug into the true history of the diamond, the more they realized that the lines between the heroes and the villains were completely blurred. Dangerous secrets involving high-ranking government officials, systemic corruption, and unsolved historical assassinations began to bleed into the light of day. Key witnesses who possessed knowledge of the diamond's original transit routes began disappearing or turning up dead under highly suspicious circumstances. The investigation was no longer just about recovering stolen property. It had evolved into a desperate life-or-death struggle to expose a conspiracy that could topple the government. Yet despite the massive scale of the ongoing investigation, the actual physical location of the Eye of Midnight remained completely unknown, lost in a sea of shadow plays. The psychological pressure on the task force reached unprecedented heights as mainstream media outlets began questioning the competence of the police department on a daily basis. Rumors of the Eye of Midnight's existence began leaking to the press, sparking widespread public fascination and sending shockwaves through international financial markets. Every major intelligence agency in the world, from the CIA to Interpol, quietly deployed specialized operatives to the city, all hunting for the same elusive prize. Marcus Vance had successfully transformed a local bank robbery into a global chess match where every major power player was desperate to make the next move. The city became a boiling pot of paranoia, with surveillance vans parked on every corner and plainclothes operatives tracking every potential lead. Detectives worked 24-hour shifts, consuming endless amounts of caffeine while staring at walls covered in suspect profiles, maps, and financial transaction strings. They discovered that Vance had been systematically liquidating his known assets and transferring billions of dollars into untraceable cryptocurrency wallets months before the heist. This indicated that the operation had been in the planning phases for years, with every contingency, including the police response, accounted for. The task force realized they were not chasing a man, but an immovable, pre-programmed sequence of events that was unfolding exactly as Vance intended. Every piece of evidence they found felt like it had been hand-delivered to them, guiding their movements like puppets on a string. The terrifying realization dawned on the lead detective that they were not closing in on the mastermind. They were being led directly into a trap. An anonymous tip received through an encrypted dark web portal suddenly broke the gridlock, directing the task force to a deep-water shipping port on the coast. The informant claimed that a high-ranking member of the syndicate was preparing to smuggle the Eye of Midnight out of the country via a registered cargo vessel. The police chief, desperate for a definitive victory, authorized a massive, high-profile tactical raid involving amphibious units, helicopters, and heavily armed ground troops. They swarmed the shipping container terminal under the cover of a torrential downpour, cutting off all entry and exit points within a 2-mile radius. Flashbang grenades detonated with blinding flashes as tactical teams breached the primary cargo vessel, subduing the heavily armed private security detail on board. A frantic, systematic search of the vessel's hidden compartments commenced, with K-9 units and advanced scanners tearing through thousands of tons of cargo. Deep within the structural hull of the ship, inside a reinforced titanium briefcase, officers discovered a velvet-lined box that sent a surge of adrenaline through the team. They opened the box to find a massive, glittering black gemstone that perfectly matched every known physical description of the stolen Eye of Midnight. The news of the recovery was instantly broadcast to the highest levels of government, bringing a collective sigh of relief to the embattled administration. However, the celebration lasted less than an hour before the state forensics lab delivered a devastating, soul-crushing blow to the entire department. The gemstone recovered from the cargo ship was a flawless, structurally perfect synthetic duplicate, manufactured with such extreme precision that only advanced molecular spectroscopy could detect it. Marcus Vance had intentionally planted the fake diamond to draw the entire police force away from the city, creating a massive security vacuum in the metropolitan core. While the tactical teams were busy raiding the shipping port, miles away, a series of coordinated, untraceable financial transfers had drained the emporium's backup insurance funds. The fake diamond was a masterstroke of misdirection designed to humiliate the authorities and buy the true conspirators valuable time to finalize their ultimate transaction. The realization that they had been completely outmaneuvered sent the police department into a state of absolute chaos and internal finger-pointing. Trust within the task force completely disintegrated as accusations of corruption and internal leaks began to fly between different agencies. The lead detective, now working completely independent of his compromised superiors, decided to revisit the original cryptic symbols left at the safe house. He began to realize that the symbols were not just geographical coordinates, but historical dates corresponding to the city's oldest forgotten architectural structures. Vance was not just playing a game of technology. He was utilizing the physical history of the city itself to conceal his final movements. Following this new historical hypothesis, the lone detective traced the symbols to a network of forgotten subterranean vaults built beneath the city during the 19th century. These forgotten tunnels had long been wiped from modern municipal maps, existing only in rare, fragile blueprints preserved in the deepest basements of the Central Library. Armed with only a flashlight and a service weapon, the detective ventured into the damp, echoing darkness beneath the bustling streets, stepping into a world frozen in time. The air was thick with the scent of decay and ancient brickwork, the silence broken only by the distant rhythmic hum of the subway system above. After hours of navigating the labyrinthine tunnels, he discovered a heavy iron-reinforced door that bore the exact emblem of the Syndicate of the Eclipse. He pushed the door open to reveal a highly sophisticated modern command center operating completely off the grid, powered by independent thermal generators. The walls were lined with high-definition monitors, displaying live, unauthorized feeds from every security camera in the city, including the police headquarters. In the center of the command station sat a laptop with a single unencrypted text file open on the screen, its cursor blinking patiently. The text file contained a personal message addressed directly to the detective, revealing that the true mastermind was never working alone. The message on the screen revealed that the entire heist had been financed and orchestrated by none other than the emporium's founder himself, who had faked his death years prior. The founder had used the Eye of Midnight as collateral to secure massive illegal loans from international syndicates to build his global empire from the shadows. Now, with the syndicates closing in to collect their debt, he had engineered the robbery to wipe out the evidence of his original financial crimes. The heist allowed him to claim a massive insurance payout while simultaneously reclaiming the diamond to sell to a higher bidder on the global black market. Marcus Vance was not a rogue criminal, but a highly paid operative hired to execute the digital infrastructure aspect of the grand deception. The detective stood frozen in shock as the pieces of the puzzle finally fell into place, revealing a web of corruption that went higher than anyone could have imagined. Suddenly, the monitors in the underground bunker began to flicker violently, displaying a countdown timer that gave the detective less than 60 seconds to evacuate. He turned and sprinted through the dark, damp tunnels as a series of controlled thermite charges detonated behind him, incinerating the entire command center. The explosion collapsed the ancient brick tunnels, obliterating every single shred of physical evidence and nearly burying the detective alive in the process. He emerged into the night air, gasping for breath, bruised and battered, realizing that he now possessed a dangerous truth that he could never prove to the world. The official investigation was quietly brought to a close by the higher-ups, publicly blamed on unidentifiable international actors who had successfully escaped justice. The media cycle quickly moved on to new scandals, leaving the true story of the Eye of Midnight buried deep within the dark, forgotten annals of history. The city returned to its normal, bustling rhythm, its citizens entirely unaware of the massive shadow war that had just been fought beneath their feet. However, the true conclusion of this grand, impossible saga was unfolding far away from the eyes of the law in a completely different world. Weeks after the explosive events of the heist, an ultra-exclusive, highly confidential black market auction was being convened at an undisclosed, heavily fortified estate. The guest list comprised the world's most dangerous and influential individuals, including rogue billionaires, syndicate bosses, and corrupt politicians from multiple continents. The atmosphere inside the grand auction hall was thick with tension and anticipation as millions of dollars in untraceable bearer bonds were prepared for transaction. A man wearing a bespoke suit and a custom-designed featureless silver mask stepped onto the main stage carrying a heavy, matte black carbon fiber case. He placed the case on the polished mahogany podium, his movements deliberate and entirely devoid of hesitation as he prepared to reveal the prize. The masked auctioneer entered a highly secure 20-digit alphanumeric passcode into the carbon fiber case, causing the pneumatic locks to hiss open with a soft mechanical sigh. He lifted the lid before the silent, captivated audience to reveal the genuine, mesmerizing eye of midnight resting on a bed of pristine black silk. The legendary gemstone seemed to absorb the ambient light of the room, radiating an aura of absolute power and dangerous mystique that captivated every eye. But right at the exact millisecond, the billionaire buyers raised their digital paddles to begin the high-stakes bidding war. The entire estate's electrical grid abruptly failed. The emergency backup generators, designed to kick in, instantly remained completely dead as a specialized electromagnetic pulse, silent wave, washed over the compound. For nearly 10 agonizing seconds, the entire auction hall was plunged into a pitch-black, suffocating darkness filled with the sounds of shouting guards and drawn weapons. When the high-voltage security lights finally flickered back to life, the heavily armed guards found themselves standing in a state of absolute paralyzed shock. The matte black carbon fiber case remained completely intact on the podium, but the velvet lining inside was entirely empty, the priceless diamond gone without a trace. No one had entered through the locked doors. No alarms had been triggered, and not a single shred of physical evidence was left behind in the room. At that exact moment, in a luxurious high-rise penthouse overlooking a completely different European city, a sophisticated, elegantly dressed woman received a short text message. The encrypted message contained only 5 chilling words. "The diamond has changed hands." She offered a cold, knowing smile to the empty room before turning around and glancing toward a massive, military-grade safe built into the reinforced concrete wall behind her. The ultimate heist that had captivated the entire world appeared to have finally reached its conclusion, but the deep, dark secrets of the Eye of Midnight remained locked forever in the shadows. The heavy steel door of the penthouse safe clicked open with a soft mechanical hiss, revealing that the ultimate criminal game had not ended, but had merely entered its most dangerous phase. The mysterious woman, known in the deepest corners of the international intelligence underworld only as Madame Onyx, reached into the vault and picked up the genuine Eye of Midnight. For decades, global governments and shadow syndicates had spilled blood to possess this single stone, entirely unaware that its physical beauty was merely a shell for a revolutionary quantum encryption key. This key possessed the unprecedented digital power to bypass every financial mainframe on the planet, giving its holder absolute control over the global banking system. As she held the freezing, pitch-black gemstone up to the faint moonlight filtering through the panoramic windows, her encrypted phone buzzed violently with a restricted high-priority incoming transmission. The voice on the other end was cold synthesized and carried an unmistakable tone of immediate urgency, warning her that her deep cover operation had been compromised from within. The syndicate of the Eclipse had already discovered her hidden sanctuary in Paris and had dispatched an elite multinational wetwork team to eliminate her and reclaim the asset. Within seconds, the penthouse's advanced perimeter motion sensors began flashing crimson, signaling that heavily armed operatives were already breaching the lower maintenance tunnels of the luxury high-rise. Onyx didn't panic. Her entire life had been a series of calculated escapes, and she had spent the last 5 years preparing for this exact moment of total exposure. She dropped the priceless diamond into a specialized signal-blocking titanium capsule, strapped a concealed subcompact weapon to her forearm, and stepped directly into the dark, rainy night. The rain fell in relentless sheets over the Parisian skyline as Madame Onyx bypassed the compromised main elevators and slipped into a forgotten vertical maintenance shaft. Below her, the muffled thuds of tactical boots and the distinct clicks of suppressed weapons echoed up the concrete shaft, confirming the deadly precision of the strike team. The operatives were moving with terrifying speed, clearing floor by floor using military-grade thermal imaging equipment that could easily detect her body heat through the walls. To neutralize their technological advantage, Onyx pulled a localized EMP grenade from her tactical belt and dropped it down the center of the shaft, counting the seconds in her head. A blinding flash of blue electrical energy erupted 3 floors below, instantly frying the enemy's night vision goggles, communication headsets, and thermal sensors in a chaotic surge of sparks. Seizing the temporary confusion, she kicked open a ventilation grate on the 20th floor, bursting into a dark, unfinished commercial office space. She sprinted across the concrete floor just as three black-clad operatives emerged from the stairwell, immediately opening fire with automatic weapons that shattered the glass partitions into a million glittering shards. Onyx dove behind a reinforced structural pillar, returning fire with lethal accuracy before leaping through a shattered window onto a window cleaner's platform suspended outside. The platform swung violently in the howling wind as she severed the primary support cables with a high-voltage cutting tool, sending her into a controlled, heart-stopping freefall toward the lower rooftops. She slammed onto the wet gravel of a lower commercial rooftop, tumbling instantly to absorb the crushing kinetic impact before scrambling into the shadows of a massive ventilation unit. Above her, the remaining syndicate operatives lined the shattered edge of the penthouse, their high-powered spotlights cutting through the rain in a desperate bid to locate her. Onyx knew that escaping the building was only the first step. The syndicate controlled the city's municipal surveillance network, meaning every traffic camera was now hunting her face. She slipped through a fire exit, descending into the historical catacombs of Paris, a sprawling underground ossuary containing the remains of millions where GPS signals went to die. The damp, narrow tunnels were filled with the oppressive scent of ancient stone and earth, the absolute silence contrasting sharply with the chaos she had left behind. As she navigated the subterranean labyrinth by sheer memory, she realized that Marcus Vance's original blueprints had integrated these exact tunnels into the final extraction route. Vance had not been a mere contractor for the Emporium's founder. He had been working as a double agent for Onyx all along, planting the clues for her to execute the final theft. But a sudden, sharp echo of footsteps splashing through the shallow water ahead told her that someone had anticipated her underground escape route. She raised her weapon, her heart hammering against her ribs as a solitary figure stepped out from the darkness into the dim beam of her tactical light. The individual standing in the damp tunnel was none other than the lone detective from the Metropolitan Task Force, looking exhausted, battered but intensely determined. After the catastrophic explosion of the underground bunker in his home city, he had refused to let the case go, tracking the digital breadcrumbs across the Atlantic on his own dime. He knew that the official police report was a massive state-sponsored cover-up designed to protect the corrupt politicians embedded within the syndicate of the eclipse. The detective leveled his service weapon at Onyx, his voice steady despite the extreme tension, demanding that she hand over the titanium capsule containing the Eye of Midnight. Onyx lowered her weapon slightly, her expression remaining entirely calm as she explained the true terrifying nature of the asset she was carrying. She revealed that if the syndicate reclaimed the diamond, they would activate the quantum key, wiping out the sovereign debts of rogue nations and triggering a global economic collapse. The detective listened in stunned silence, realizing that his pursuit of a simple robbery case had dragged him into the epicenter of a shadow war for the future of the free world. Before he could make a decision, the distant, unmistakable sound of barking attack dogs echoed through the tunnels behind them, signaling that the syndicate's trackers had breached the catacombs. With their survival instantly threatened, the cop and the master thief were forced into an uneasy temporary alliance to escape the subterranean tomb alive. The subterranean chase turned into a frantic, claustrophobic nightmare as the sound of the syndicate's attack dogs grew louder, their fierce growls bouncing off the bone-lined walls. Onyx and the detective sprinted through the twisting, narrow corridors, their flashlights cutting erratic beams through the thick, stagnant dust of the ancient catacombs. The syndicate operatives were closing the distance rapidly, firing blindly down the dark tunnels, their high-caliber rounds chipping away at the historical stonework and sending shards of rock flying through the air. Onyx led the detective through a series of structural archways that were on the verge of collapse, pulling a remote detonated microcharge from her pack and planting it on the master keystone. As they burst into a wider flooded chamber, she pressed the detonator, triggering a localized explosion that brought thousands of tons of rock and ancient earth crashing down. The massive cave-in completely sealed the tunnel behind them, cutting off the advance of the operatives and burying the attack dogs beneath a wall of immovable debris. The sudden silence that followed was heavy and suffocating, broken only by the sound of their ragged breathing and the steady dripping of water from the ancient ceiling. They had bought themselves a few precious minutes, but they were now hopelessly lost deep within a section of the catacombs that had been sealed off for over a century. The detective checked his tactical compass only to find the needle spinning erratically due to the dense iron ore deposits in the surrounding rock formations. Onyx, relying on a highly classified digitized map stored in her encrypted wrist terminal, identified a forgotten medieval aqueduct that led directly toward the River Seine. As they waded through the waist-deep, freezing water of the aqueduct, the detective questioned her about the true identity of the syndicate's ultimate leader, the mysterious architect. Onyx revealed a truth that shook the detective to his core. The architect was not a corporate billionaire or a foreign warlord, but the sitting director of Interpol himself. The very man who had been publicly spearheading the international hunt for the stolen diamond was the one who had engineered its theft from the very beginning. This revelation explained how the syndicate was always one step ahead of law enforcement, how they possessed classified satellite tracking data, and why the task force had been dismantled. The realization that the system he had dedicated his entire life to serving was fundamentally rotten from the top down filled the detective with a cold, righteous fury. They finally reached a rusted iron grating at the end of the aqueduct, breaking through it to emerge onto a secluded, dark concrete embankment along the banks of the Seine. The cool night air was a welcome relief, but their freedom was instantly cut short as the bright beam of a helicopter searchlight slammed down upon them from above. The thunderous roar of the helicopter's rotor blades drowned out all sound as the spotlight pinned Onyx and the detective against the concrete wall of the embankment. From the shadows of the nearby bridge, 3 unmarked black SUVs tore across the pavement, their tires screeching violently as they boxed in the duo's only land-based escape routes. Heavily armed contractors, dressed in tactical gear, poured out of the vehicles, their lasers painting crimson dots directly onto the chests of the detective and Onyx. Standing at the forefront of the tactical line was a man in a pristine civilian suit, his cold eyes reflecting the harsh light of the helicopter above. It was the director of Interpol himself, stepping forward with a sinister, triumphant smile that confirmed every word Onyx had spoken in the dark tunnels below. He commended the detective for his relentless investigative work, but made it clear that the game had officially reached its absolute conclusion on this riverbank. The director demanded the titanium capsule containing the Eye of Midnight, promising a swift, painless death for the detective and a lifetime of imprisonment for Onyx if they complied. Onyx looked at the detective, a subtle, almost imperceptible nod passing between them as they realized that playing by the rules of the law was no longer an option. Instead of surrendering, Onyx reached into her pocket, but instead of pulling out the diamond capsule, she pulled out a high-intensity military flashbang device. The blinding million-candle-power detonation of the flashbang transformed the dark riverbank into a wall of pure, agonizing white light, instantly blinding the tactical team and the helicopter pilot. The accompanying concussive shockwave disoriented the operatives, sending them stumbling backward as they fired their weapons wildly into the empty air. Onyx grabbed the detective's jacket, dragging him over the stone concrete barrier as they dove together into the freezing, fast-moving currents of the River Seine below. High-caliber rounds punched into the water all around them, creating miniature geysers as the syndicate contractors recovered their vision and opened fire into the dark water. The current was incredibly powerful, pulling them deep beneath the surface and sweeping them away from the immediate kill zone before they could succumb to the gunfire. They surfaced nearly a quarter-mile downstream beneath the shadow of a massive industrial barge, gasping for air and shivering violently from the profound hypothermia setting in. Onyx pulled themselves onto the rusted deck of the unanchored barge, checking the titanium capsule on her belt to confirm that the Eye of Midnight was still secure. They knew that staying in Paris was suicide. The director would declare them international terrorists within the hour, triggering an unprecedented global manhunt that would cover every airport and border station. Their only hope of survival was to take the fight directly to the syndicate's core digital server farm located in a highly fortified alpine bunker in Switzerland. 24 hours later, Having smuggled themselves across the Swiss border, inside the hollowed-out cargo hold of a freight train, they arrived at the frozen peaks of the Alps. The syndicate's primary data fortress was buried deep inside a hollowed-out mountain peak, a relic of the Cold War that had been converted into a technological stronghold. This facility housed the master servers that controlled the entire network of corrupt financial transactions, blackmail files, and the activation mainframe for the Eye of Midnight. The wind howled furiously, driving the temperature far below zero as Onyx and the detective crawled through the deep snow toward the facility's external ventilation intake. Onyx used a specialized thermite paste to cut through the reinforced steel security louvers, creating an opening just wide enough for them to slip inside. They dropped into the facility's primary environmental control sublevel, the freezing mountain air instantly replaced by the hot hum of thousands of server racks. Onyx connected her wrist terminal to a localized network port, hacking into the facility's internal security grid to map the positions of the automated defense turrets. She discovered that Marcus Vance was actually being held captive in the central server core, being forced under torture to finalize the integration coding for the diamond. They moved through the sterile, white-lit corridors with weapons drawn, knowing that a single mistake would alert the entire base and seal their doom. They breached the heavy biometric doors of the central server core, a massive multi-story chamber filled with towering racks of humming supercomputers cooled by liquid nitrogen. In the center of the room, strapped to a metallic medical chair surrounded by monitors, was a severely weakened, bruised Marcus Vance. His fingers were tied to a specialized keyboard, forced to type out lines of quantum code under the watchful eyes of two elite syndicate technicians. The detective moved with lethal fluid precision, neutralizing both technicians with silent takedowns before they could strike the master alarm console on the desk. Onyx rushed to Vance's side, cutting his restraints and injecting him with a fast-acting adrenaline stimulant to restore his cognitive functions for the final hack. Vance looked up at Onyx, his eyes filled with a mixture of profound relief and intense terror, as he warned them that the director was already inside the base. He explained that the director had already initiated a remote command override, bypassing the manual safety locks to force the immediate upload of the quantum encryption key. Onyx pulled the genuine Eye of Midnight from its titanium capsule and slotted it into the central laser scanning array of the main computer terminal. The diamond immediately lit up with an internal ethereal crimson glow as the high-powered laser beams began reading the microscopic data structures etched within its crystalline matrix. They breached the heavy biometric doors of the central server core, a massive multi-story chamber filled with towering racks of humming supercomputers cooled by liquid nitrogen. In the center of the room, strapped to a metallic medical chair surrounded by monitors, was a severely weakened, bruised Marcus Vance. His fingers were tied to a specialized keyboard, forced to type out lines of quantum code under the watchful eyes of two elite syndicate technicians. The detective moved with lethal fluid precision, neutralizing both technicians with silent takedowns before they could strike the master alarm console on the desk. Onyx rushed to Vance's side, cutting his restraints and injecting him with a fast-acting adrenaline stimulant to restore his cognitive functions for the final hack. Vance looked up at Onyx, his eyes filled with a mixture of profound relief and intense terror, as he warned them that the director was already inside the base. He explained that the director had already initiated a remote command override, bypassing the manual safety locks to force the immediate upload of the quantum encryption key. Onyx pulled the genuine Eye of Midnight from its titanium capsule and slotted it into the central laser scanning array of the main computer terminal. The diamond immediately lit up with an internal ethereal crimson glow as the high-powered laser beams began reading the microscopic data structures etched within its crystalline matrix. Before Onyx could stop him, the detective volunteered for the task, stating that his duty had always been to protect the innocent, no matter the personal cost. He sprinted into the glass-enclosed reactor chamber, the air crackling with visible arcs of high-voltage blue electricity that singed his clothing and burned his skin. He grabbed the heavy iron release valve, his muscles screaming in agony as the immense electrical current surged directly through his body from the metal. With a final heroic burst of strength, he turned the valve, completely cutting off the liquid nitrogen flow and sending the system into an instantaneous thermal shock. The massive server racks began exploding in a chaotic chain reaction of white smoke, liquid nitrogen bursts, and shattered glass panels. The progress bar on the master monitor froze at 99%, flashing a critical system failure error before the entire screen went completely black. The director, watching his life's work disintegrate in a matter of seconds, screamed in pure unbridled rage from the observation booth above. He drew a weapon and prepared to breach the room to kill them himself. But the facility's main power grid completely collapsed, plunging the entire mountain base into total darkness. Onyx used the chaos to drag the semi-conscious detective out of the reactor chamber, while Vance grabbed the diamond from the ruined laser array. Hours later, as the rising sun cast a brilliant golden glow over the snowy peaks of the Swiss Alps, emergency rescue helicopters began circling the smoking mountain facility. The blast had completely neutralized the syndicate of the eclipse, destroying their master databases and exposing their global network of corruption to intelligence agencies worldwide. The director of Interpol was found dead inside the ruined command booth, killed by the thermal backdraft of the exploding supercomputers he had tried to control. The detective, severely burned, but alive, was loaded onto a medical transport helicopter, his reputation fully restored, and his name cleared of all false charges. Marcus Vance had vanished into the snowy landscape before the first authorities arrived, taking his brilliant mind back into the deep safety of the shadows. On a secluded, sun-drenched beach halfway across the world, an elegantly dressed woman sat at an open-air cafe sipping an iced drink. She opened a small, unassuming wooden box on the table, looking at the eye of midnight, which was now just an ordinary, beautiful black gemstone. The dangerous quantum data codes inside had been permanently erased during the server core explosion, leaving behind nothing but a priceless piece of history. Her phone chimed with a single unencrypted text message from an unknown number. "The world is safe. What's next?" She offered a mysterious smile to the endless horizon, closed the wooden box, and walked away into the crowd. The impossible heist that had shaken the world was officially over, but for Madame Onyx, a new game was just beginning.